Today, I am going to be talking about chapter 10 in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And it is titled Training in Aspiration Bodhicitta. So what this means is that we can, well, first of all, Bodhicitta, as a reminder, is this aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, so that you can lead all sentient beings to enlightenment and total liberation from suffering. So once we make this aspiration, we have the risk of losing this aspiration, of giving up on the idea of being motivated to benefit others, and so forth. Or we can have dislike for certain people, or are angry at them and feel that, no, I don't want to benefit them, that they don't deserve it, or whatever. And so the remedy for this, to avoid this fault of forsaking even one single sentient being, is to keep compassion in mind, that keep this aspiration, bodhicitta, in mind, and this keeps it from being degraded and then lost entirely, possibly. So it's a very important aspiration. It is really the Mahayana aspiration. It's the heart of the Bodhisattva vow. And we want to make sure that we continue having this motivation, and if possible, have it increase more and more and be an even stronger motivation. Another remedy is recollecting the beneficial effects of bodhicitta. That just remember why it is so special. Trangu Rinpoche, I'm sure it's Gampopa that uses this analogy. He says it's like a sphere that, like you would use in battle long time ago, and it defeats all negativities, all the enemies of negativity. He says it's like an axe, because the axe fells the tree of suffering. It's like a wish-fulfilling gem, that it grants every wish when we have this deep in our heart, this motivation of bodhicitta. So just being aware of how precious it is keeps it from decreasing and vanishing. The third is to using the two accumulations of merit and wisdom to strengthen the bodhicitta. And so the first accumulation is merit or virtuous actions, and the second is wisdom. And so virtuous actions means any action of body, speech, and mind. But it goes beyond just thinking about it. It's actually doing something about it. And this accumulation of virtuous action or merit is conceptual. The wisdom accumulation is to understand, at least try to have an understanding of the ultimate nature. And this keeps us from becoming prideful when we do virtuous actions. So it's important to keep this ultimate aspect or primordial wisdom in mind, even if you have not experienced it directly. And then there is the fourth point he makes here is practicing bodhicitta. And bodhi means mind, and chitta means awake. Excuse me, bodhi means awake and chitta means mind. So what it is referring to here is that this bodhicitta is the mind of a bodhisattva and the mind of a Buddha, this aspiration to benefit beings. So practicing bodhicitta is the method for increasing bodhicitta. And we want it to become a habit. And if it's a habit, it develops and it strengthens, and we get to cultivate it again and again and again. So he mentions three ways that we can do this practicing bodhicitta. So the first is to work on the causes of increasing bodhicitta, which are loving kindness and compassion. We want to have a mind that is steeped in compassion and steeped in loving kindness, and keep reminding ourselves of this and the importance of loving kindness and compassion. This is the mind of enlightenment. And this is what is the cause of increasing our bodhicitta. And when we have the mind of loving kindness and compassion, we have pure motivation present too, that we are not involved in a lot of egotistical activities. The second point here is to understand that we want long-term happiness for everyone, that our bodhicitta is this desire that everyone experience long-term happiness. It's the only way to become a Buddha, having this aspiration that may everyone have long-term happiness. So think over and over again, quote, I want to accomplish Buddhahood in order to really be able to help beings in the very ultimate sense. That comes from 171 in my edition of the book. It's not mentioned here, but it's also helpful to think that you cannot accomplish Buddhahood without others, without other beings, because you have to have this desire to lead all beings to happiness permanently. So even difficult beings help you accomplish Buddhahood. So keep that in mind too when you get into, let's say, a difficult situation with a difficult person, that they are actually assisting you, perhaps teaching you patience. The next point is to help others directly and examine ourselves. So direct help would be like giving things to other people, things that we own to other people. Give them Dharma. If you know even a little bit of Dharma, give them a little bit of Dharma. And he uses the example of, for people that have difficulty giving things to other people, is that you take an valuable object in your right hand and then give it to your left hand. And by doing this, you are training yourself to take something in your hand and then give it. And then eventually you give something to somebody else. But the point is to start doing it very, very simply and develop this habit of giving. Now, the other is this examining ourselves. It means to examine our minds and to do it daily. Look and see, kind of ask yourself, how am I doing? Has my motivation been pure? How many positive things have I accomplished today? What about the negative activity? Have I done things that have been negative? So by examining our minds and examining our actions, we can gradually eliminate obstacles and hindrances, and we can reinforce positive behavior. If you find that you have engaged in some positive things, fine. You could say, dedicate the merit. Feel that this is good, that this has happened. So now, this was under the point of practicing bodhicitta, the method in increasing bodhicitta. And so he had these 3 points. The next section is rejection of the 4 unwholesome deeds and acceptance of the 4 wholesome deeds. And this reminded me a bit of the way the 10 non-virtuous actions are presented, which is that you have the 10 non-virtuous actions, and then you have the 10 virtuous actions, which are, you might say, the opposite of the non-virtuous actions. So this is a common way in Tibetan Buddhism of presenting unwholesome and wholesome actions. Here, it's talking about bodhicitta again. And bodhicitta is a state of mind. It is motivation. And so there are 4 actions that are unwholesome. And he points out that they need to be remedied within 4 hours, or your bodhicitta has deteriorated. Now, that doesn't mean that it's busted. It means that it's deteriorated a little bit and needs to have some upkeep, you could say. But if you remedy it within 4 hours, then you have taken care of that. And it could be as simple as doing the Bodhisattva mantra. It could be doing a short confession. But it is, the sooner you recognize that you have engaged in an unwholesome action and do something about it, the less long-term problem there is. So the first unwholesome action is to lie with the intention to deceive someone, especially a teacher, a parent, or encouraging other people to tell lies. So the reason why this is unwholesome is its impure motivation, that you are not thinking about benefiting others. You are engaged in a very egotistical, self-centered motivation. And Gampopa says that it doesn't even matter if you never even said it. It was just thinking it. was enough. And it doesn't matter if you said it, but the person that you said it to didn't take it seriously and it had no effect on them. The very fact that you said it or that you thought it is enough. So the positive action, you could say the opposite of this is, quote, having the pure motivation that refuses to consciously lie. And he says, lying out of ignorance is not a conscious lie. So if you are ignorant about something, think that it is true, and you tell other people about it, but you thought it was true, then even if it is not true, that is not a lie. He says that with pure motivation, we spontaneously act honestly, truthfully, and have beneficial results. So it is really important to avoid lying in this particular instance. On the other hand, if we're lying to protect beings, that doesn't count as a lie. Very simply, a very good example is that when I'm driving around out here, sometimes just in the house, I see deer. And especially bucks, because when deer hunting comes around, if I start saying, well, I saw a buck at such and such a location, or if someone asks me, have you seen a buck in the area? Of course, I'm not going to tell them. I am going to say, oh, I haven't seen them. And so that doesn't count as a lie because you're doing it to protect other beings. A second unwholesome action is to cause someone to regret something positive that they have done. It could be simply saying something like, why are you spending so much time practicing? There are more important things to do. And again, it doesn't matter if what you say has an effect on the others, but you are breaking your bodhisattva vow and it needs to be remedied. So we have to be careful of our speech, as well as be careful of our motivation. So the wholesome, the opposite, the wholesome action that is opposite of this is to encourage people that are doing negative things to do something positive, to encourage others to follow the Mahayana path, for instance. The third unwholesome action is a lack of respect for bodhisattvas. And Krangu Rinpoche says this about bodhisattvas, quote, someone who has really entered the path of the Mahayana and who has generated the pure state of mind of bodhicitta. Traditionally, a bodhisattva is a person who has had the direct experience of emptiness. This is not mentioned in this chapter, but basically, we're talking about a being that has a fairly high level of realization, that they are, you might say, way above us in terms of where they are in the path. So they have qualities that are better than our qualities, or you might say mundane qualities of ordinary beings. They're not self-centered. Being with a bodhisattva can only be good for us, Trungpa Rinpoche says, and that there's no need to fear these bodhisattvas. He said, on the other hand, it is justified to be fearful around ordinary people who are self-centered. But sometimes we can get that wrong and feel quite comfortable with being around self-centered people and feel uncomfortable around a bodhisattva. So the unwholesome action is to speak out of anger or spite about a bodhisattva, to be afraid of them, to not show respect for a bodhisattva. And this then shows that you have little respect for bodhicitta either. And again, it breaks the bodhisattva vow, and it needs to be remedied. The sooner the better. Now, the opposite is appreciating the qualities of bodhisattvas, speaking well of them to other people, talk about their qualities, think about their qualities, and so forth. So this bodhicitta motivation leads to positive results. And so they have this motivation instead of selfish motivation, and therefore they are able to benefit beings much more than ordinary beings. And we need to respect that and do what we can to increase our own bodhicitta motivation. Trungpa Rinpoche says that selfish motivation leads to actions that are always tainted by something negative. So that is how he sums up this particular unwholesome, you might say number 3 of the unwholesome deeds. The fourth one is having deceitful intentions towards others. Quote, it refers directly to the intention to deceive, to the negative state of mind of deceit. So again, this is about an attitude, about motivation, intention. It's not about actions of body and speech. And it breaks the bodhisattva vow. So the wholesome action that is related to this is have the intention to benefit and help others, to be mindful of our motivation and let go of selfish motivation, and to work on developing pure motivation. And that finishes up chapter 10. So now I am going to begin chapter 11. And this is titled Training in Action, Bodhicitta. So actually doing something about this motivation, bodhicitta, aspiration, bodhicitta. So this is just the practical application of this pure aspiration, bodhicitta. And it is very simply training in the 6 paramitas. He talks about 3 right off the bat in this chapter, 3 types of training: training of superior conduct, training in superior thought, training in superior wisdom. Again, the word superior is used because we're talking about bodhicitta. So superior conduct, training in it, means to practice the first paramita of generosity and the second paramita of ethical conduct, of discipline. These two work with desire and then also patience, and that works with anger. So by practicing generosity, ethical conduct, practicing patience, we are working with desire and anger. He mentions diligence being part of this too. And I would say that means getting things done in a timely manner, diligence. But diligence also applies to superior thought and training in superior wisdom. He felt that diligence applies to all three categories. He did not mention any other paramita in training in superior thought besides diligence. So I'm not going to mention anything else. The third training in superior wisdom, this involves the paramitas of meditative concentration. And he uses the term wisdom awareness. Frequently, it's just called the paramita of wisdom or prajna. And these are the remedy for ignorance and delusion. So you have generosity and ethical conduct working with desire, patience working with anger, meditative concentration and wisdom working with ignorance. So those are the three main poisons of the mind. So he then has, let me see here, 6 different categories. This is very brief. So the first one, and these are all about this action, bodhicitta. Sometimes it's translated as activity, bodhicitta. But it means actually doing something. So the first point is that there's a definite number. And it is that the first 3, generosity, ethics, and patience, guide us to the right kind of life. So the benefit is in this lifetime. Then in the next lifetime, generosity leads to a prosperous situation that we find ourselves in. Ethical conduct causes a good physical existence in our next lifetime, and patience, being patient, and avoiding irritation and anger and so forth, that this leads to a favorable entourage. Now, the other 3, diligence, meditative concentration, and wisdom awareness, they lead to much longer term benefits, that they lead to the goal of the path to Buddhahood. So diligence increases virtue. Meditative concentration increases our calm abiding. And wisdom awareness brings special insight. So that is the definite number. Definite order is the second point here. The first paramita of generosity is the easiest to practice. And as you go through the list, the subsequent one is a little more difficult to practice than the previous one. So the order is generosity, ethical conduct, patience, diligence, meditative concentration, and then the wisdom awareness. So each step gets a little more difficult to practice. On the other hand, they enhance each other, that your generosity also helps you have better discipline, better ethical conduct, because you become more willing to part with material things. And patience makes it easier to follow ethical guidelines and behave virtuously, and so on. He says patience leads to diligence, and through diligence, meditative concentration arises. And from that meditative concentration, you have the chance to realize the true nature of phenomena. So that is the order. Next, the next point is characteristics. That these are not ordinary qualities. These are very special qualities. Earlier, the book talks about thinking about and contemplating the qualities of bodhisattvas and the qualities of having this aspiration, bodhicitta. So there are four characteristics. The first is that each quality or paramita can remedy the opposite defect. So generosity remedies avarice. And you can just go right down the line for these the different paramitas. The second characteristic is that each paramita implies the realization of emptiness. And what that means is that the perfection of each of these paramitas culminates with the realization of emptiness. So that's why it is implied. The third characteristic is that the six paramitas are qualities that benefit others. That if you have them, you will be benefiting others just by having them. And the fourth point emphasizes this at a deeper level, and that is that whoever has the perfection of these six paramitas can mature other beings, can lead them to liberation and total freedom. The next is the definition. So the Tibetan phrase for paramita is parol du chinpa, and it means gone to the other shore. Trungpa Rinpoche says, gone to the other side of existence, left samsara. That this means going beyond existence, in fact. And so that going back to generosity, that the perfection of generosity is not about worldly generosity. It is the generosity of an enlightened being, which is far superior to the generosity of an ordinary being. Next is a division. And under this section, this title, he says it's not practiced for ordinary motivation, that we practice these paramitas for one purpose, and that is to reach the other shore, to attain enlightenment, to benefit all beings. Quote, it has to do with what is beyond existence. So this divides it from ordinary motivation and a bodhisattva from an ordinary being. The sixth point is titled grouping. So this is how it is grouped. Merit and virtue, he's dividing it into the two accumulations. So merit and virtue are one group. Wisdom and insight is the other group. Generosity and ethics are in the first group, that is of merit, virtuous behavior. Wisdom awareness is in the second group. And Gampopa feels that patience and diligence and meditative concentration are in both groups, that they cause the accumulation of merit and virtue, but they also cause the accumulation of wisdom. So that completes these two chapters. The question is that ignorance is one of the three poisons, yet if you tell a lie out of ignorance, it's not counted as lying. Why is that? And unlike legal in a court of law where ignorance is no excuse, if you violate the law, here, if you are just plain ignorant and actually believe that the sun rises in the west, you are that confused, and you say the sun rises in the west, that's not lying, you're just ignorant. Some people might even say stupid, but it's not considered a lie. On the other hand, it is good and important to try to know what we're talking about and not talk out of ignorance. The question is, well, what if you act out of ignorance and because of what you have said or done, somebody else then does something negative? And this is not good. There's no question it's not good. Here he's talking about, does it degrade our bodhicitta? But definitely, ignorance is never good. And so, as was pointed out before, it is one of the three poisons, and it is an important one, and we want to be able to see our ignorance as often as possible and to eliminate eventually our ignorance, which is, there's basic ignorance, which is taking that which is not a self to be a self and that which is not other to be an other. Here, I think we're talking more about things like denial, pretending that it's not happening, not caring, apathy, and so forth. The question, it's a follow-up question. So just let's hypothetically suppose that I am against vaccines and I talk about it and keep a person from getting vaccinated and then they catch COVID and they die. That doesn't sound very good. And the questioner is right, you're causing harm. But if you truly believe that, this is my understanding of what is being said here, it doesn't degrade your bodhicitta. However, you do have to face up with these consequences of some responsibility for causing the death of another person. So it's not a get out of jail free card. Yes, so the question is, well, what if you have really good motivation, but the results are harmful? And it's interesting because in this section, he pretty much talks about if you have bodhicitta motivation, the results are always going to be good. In other parts of the Dharma, they talk about white motivation and white action. White motivation, black action, black motivation, white action, black motivation, black action. So this is close, but they're slightly different. Here we're just talking about this bodhicitta motivation, being motivated to benefit all beings, to lead them completely, totally out of suffering and to become enlightened so that you are able to do that. So if the example was I convince someone to get a vaccine and then they are allergic to it and they die, again, you were doing this out of bodhicitta motivation to benefit them. And so the consequences are much, much smaller than if you intended the action to happen, if you intended for them to do something that would kill them.